og er i øjeblikket udstationeret i Shanghai på et 3-års ophold.
All right, Mr. Fallows, thank you so much for joining us here
My
today
pleasure.
on your autumn vacation back from China. And of course, you're going to help us do several things in this interview, the first of which is just to understand what's going on in China.
I'll do my best.
What's happening there?
A lot. Everything's happening in every corner of the country all the time. As you and I speak, the national leadership is going through its party congress to try to figure out who's going to be in command.
For 30 years now, everyone has been waiting for the communists sort of to go back in and to say, look, we really have to, some kind of argument, the same thing that happened constantly in the Soviet Union over decades. Why is that? Why is it not in the interest of any of the people in the Communist Party to go out and say, I now represent the communist tradition?
It's very difficult in today's China to appeal to sort of an abused sense of lost Chinese greatness. China is stronger now under today's capitalism than it was 30 years ago under Mao. The reverse, one can argue, is true for Russia versus the Soviet Union. Russia would like to be a great power. So that's one thing.
So there's no longing for the immediate past? There's no...
No, not at all. In fact, if there's something which unites almost everyone in the sense of China is no nostalgia. I mean, very faint nostalgia. As Beijing is bulldozed to make way for the Olympics, people are nostalgic for the old neighborhoods, but most people are materially better off. When it comes to the U.S., I think it's the thing which stuns me. This is the least anti-American country I've been in, I think, in the last 20 years. You know, the leadership recognizes it's in their interest to keep the U.S. off their back and not to make trouble with the U.S. Average people are much more, well, as an American in the Iraq era, I find when I'm in Europe, when I'm in New Zealand, when I'm in South America, usually the first thing that comes up is, why is your damn government doing these stupid things? I say, well, I think they're stupid too, et cetera. This never comes up in China. And it is weirdly the least anti-American place I've been. And average people still have the sense in general that America is a rich place. They'd like to go to Harvard. They'd like to go to Silicon Valley and start a company. Most of their relatives have had a good experience there. So, and the version of history they are taught, the version of the 1940s they're taught is Japan bad, America good. China, China's view of itself is that it is historically not expansionist. You know, the people in Tibet have a different view of that. The people in Xinjiang province, which used to be Turkestan, have a different view. But certainly its territorial expansionism is like America's in the 19th century, of sort of becoming its own continental power. The ideological component that would also make a sort of Cold War is strangely almost absent from China in even sort of a creepy way. I think if I've tried to interview people about what is the Chinese idea, what are they trying to project to the world, and they sort of look puzzled, and maybe because of the Cultural Revolution, people are wary of having these ideas, but finally the one thing they'll volunteer is we want recognition, we want respect, and that's about it, which is not we want people in Denmark to live differently. And during Chairman Mao's time, they did.
Now, I mean, clearly, I mean, the dominant analysis is this, that the Chinese government is very much aware of the kind of things that could derail economic development. And so they will solve these problems as they arise. And this is why democracy will not happen, at least not in the coming decade or so, because the party will successfully be able to just clear away every single obstacle that could give rise to a democratic opposition.
I would agree with the dominant analysis with this minor editing. I think it means the leadership will try to do all those things. The leadership will try to stop the pollution before it becomes life-threatening and economy-threatening and Olympics-threatening, which is the most imminent possibility. It will try to satisfy the demands of farmers before the hundreds of thousands of protests per year become much larger than that. So the question is, can they do it? So far in the last 25 years, they've avoided each disaster just before they're about to hit it. And if they're able to continue that, then they'll maintain this record. It does seem clear to me and undeniable that among the list of grievances of the Chinese populations, democratic government is on there, but it's not near the top of the list.
Now, this really seems to me, I mean, this entire development, this entire discussion really seems to me to put the West and the U.S. in a pickle, in the sense that we are so used to, from 50 years of the Cold War, we are so used to having the image of a dissident, who is someone who we admire, who we protect if we can. Where does this, I mean, if we're looking now at 10 or 20 years where China is proceeding down this path, where does that leave us as Western media and Western politicians in terms of dealing with the dissidents?
That's a fascinating question, at least fascinating to me, because I've been wrestling with this myself over all the time I've been in China. And I think certainly the model that we have from the old Soviet Union, from today's Burma, from the old Poland or whatever, the old East Germany, I think doesn't really apply in China because I don't think there is a powerful mainstream movement in China for democracy itself. You know, they would like to have more accountability. What they would like above all is more rule of law. You know, not having people who are activists for environmental issues or for regional issues be arbitrarily locked up, taken away, killed, as is the case. So I think over time, the appropriate Western emphasis on political transformation in China should be civil liberties and rule of law as opposed to structural democracy. We've seen in Iraq that structural democracy takes one only so far, and so I think we'd be most in sympathy both with the long-term interests of China and with what is achievable and with the desires of those people who are political reformers in China to push more strongly for civil liberties first, rule of law, justice, accountability. Those are the things that really matter.
I can understand that, and I can sort of see the argument in favor of the gradual model and say, well, maybe it might even be 80 or 90% of the Chinese who are in favor of moderate development, just leaving it be and so forth. I can understand that argument, but it still seems to me to leave us in a very difficult position with regards to those reformers and those dissidents. Because if I am a Chinese dissident and reformer, I say, look, this is not enough for me. I want my freedom of speech. I want everything, and I am expecting the Western media and the Western politicians to protect it.
But to be clear about what I'm saying, I want to protect that dissident's freedom of speech too. If I knew of a lot of dissidents who are saying what we really need are parliamentary elections, it would be a different matter. I don't know of a lot of people saying that. I know of people saying, I want freedom of speech, I want to be able to organize a demonstration without being arrested, I want to have the Chinese version of the KGB, the Public Security Bureau. I want them not around my house all the time. To me, those are in the civil liberties category, and we should stand with those dissidents. But I don't know of people saying, give me elections. I mean, there are some who are saying that as the first thing on their list. I'm sure there are some in a country of 1 billion plus people, but they are not the leaders of the democratizing movement there.
You've made the argument recently that all of the economic problems in the U.S. that some people are blaming on China, the most significant of them anyway, are really American problems. They have to do with the American economy and how America is doing. But at the same time, you have the anti-Chinese rhetoric. Is there a danger that could, if not disrupt, relations fundamentally, at least cool them or impair the relationship?
Sure. And this is a complicated relationship, and lots of things the Chinese do will disrupt it also, and lots of things the Americans do. But the Chinese, they will continue to do things that the U.S. doesn't like. The U.S. will properly do things like welcoming the Dalai Lama here, which China doesn't like. So
why did the president do that?
I think he did it. He's the first president to be photographed seeing the Dalai Lama, although the other ones have had private meetings. And I think he did it consistent with a good part of Western liberal tradition. The Dalai Lama is careful to say that he does not advocate separatism of Tibet from China, which is the one thing the Chinese would go to war to stop tomorrow. But what he says, every word that President Bush used in greeting the Dalai Lama had to do with religious freedom and freedom of conscience. It wasn't about separatism. And so Western powers in the United States should stand for freedom of religion and freedom of conscience. And so it's proper for the President of the United States to welcome a Nobel Peace Prize laureate who stands for religious freedom. So that's fine. If the Chinese don't like it, that's their problem. If he were
you're actually praising President Bush now, aren't you?
Yes, believe it or not.
So, very subtly, but still.
No, I will say President Bush did the right thing in welcoming the Dalai Lama. He did something else recently that I agreed with. I can't remember now, but he did.
What it was.
It'll come to me.
Moment, yes.